Good afternoon, everybody. Very pleased to see you all here today. I'd like to welcome the audience who join us from a variety of places, including the UK, Georgia, Bahrain, Germany, Singapore. I'd also like to welcome those of you watching and streaming live on our streaming channel. And of course, a warm welcome to each of our panelists, who are Tram and Nguyen, founder and CEO of the Centre for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship. Ruth Hall, CEO at Plas Brenin, the National Outdoor Centre. Rachel, Head of Interdisciplinary Studies at Leeds Beckett University. Chenaara Edghill-Peart, founder and directress at Peart's Montessori. And Preeti Patel, Head of Education at Montessori Centre International. Later on, they'll each give you a brief introduction of themselves. Our rapporteur today, who's sitting behind the scenes, is Kate Addison, and she'll be writing the key points and any calls to action from today's conversation. These I'll share later with the Global Chair and the other participating cities during the session. All of our comments and calls for action will form part of a white paper and will be published later in the year for everyone to access. Our conversation today is women's leadership in times of crises, and for us, the focus on education in the UK. Education's a broad church, often thought of as statutory education from 5 to 16 years, tertiary education, adult education, research, academia. But it also encompasses early years, which is birth to 5 years, outdoor education for both adults and children, mass online education for children and adults, and much, much more. Our panelists today represent various parts of that sector. There are lots of examples of women in positions of leadership. You might argue that. Moldova has recently elected their first female prime minister. Angela Merkel has been Chancellor of Germany for 15 years. Prime Minister Ardern of New Zealand is the third female PM. In the UK, Baroness Hale served until 2020 as President of the Supreme Court of Justice, and Anne Walmsley is head of GlaxoSmithKline. However, there are still lots of firsts. Here in the UK, Dame Sharon White recently took up the chair at John Lewis. Cressida Dick, who heads up our Metropolitan Police. Carolyn McCall, the first CEO of ITV, and Bobby Chimagrub, the first Asian woman to be a High Court judge, and so on. Today, we'll talk about female and women leadership and how that might differ in different situations. We'll explore whether women lead differently in times of crisis. We'll set out challenges and opportunities that face women. We'll describe and try and describe what needs to be done in the future to support female leadership and much more. Along the way, I'll invite you, the audience, to join our conversation by commenting, and do please ask questions as we go through. Are we all sitting comfortably? I hope so. Let's begin. Let's begin. I'd like to start actually just by asking each of you to give us a short and brief introduction to who you are, so that those listening in and watching can get a little bit of context about the breadth of the sector. Can I ask Tram, would you like to go first?
Yes, of course. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly well. Thank you.
Yes. No, first, I feel very warm to be here. So thanks a lot for inviting me. It's a great pleasure, especially for today. So I'm Nguyen, and I'm the co-founder of CFTE. We are the Centre for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship. We are one of the fastest growing knowledge platform in fintech and digital finance. We're based in the UK.
Thank you very much, Traman. Preeti Patel, over to you.
Thank you, Max. My name is Preeti Patel. I'm Head of Education at Montessori Centre International. Happy International Women's Day to everyone. After 15 years of leading practice in a Montessori daycare nursery as a qualified early years educator and nursery manager, mentoring staff teams and individual early years educators has become a bit of a passion for me. I bring this experience and passion to supporting and developing students and their learning experiences across a wide portfolio of Montessori training and recognised qualifications at Montessori Centre International.
Thanks, Preeti. Rachel, over to you.
Hi everybody, I'm Rachel Boyle. I'm the Head of Interdisciplinary Studies at Leeds Beckett University. We've recently gone into an incredibly exciting partnership with Montessori. We've started the International Montessori Institute, where we will be training specialised teachers in Montessori skills. We are then hoping to develop some postgraduate programmes and ultimately to create the world's first ever professor of Montessori education. So incredibly exciting times for us.
Thanks, Rachel. Chenaara.
Hello everyone, I am Chenaara Edghill-Peart. I am the founder and head directress of Peart's Montessori, which is a brand new Montessori, which are opening in a couple of weeks' time. So apt to be talking about leadership during a crisis. Previously, I qualified as a barrister and I spent 10 years working in the legal sector. I've worked globally and I'm also a second generation Montessori teacher as well as a former Montessori child. Thank you,
Chenaara. And Ruth, over to you.
Hi, I'm Ruth Hall. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a fantastic, it's great to be able to participate in something as amazing as this. With such esteemed panellists as well. So my background, I'm currently working for the Plas Brenin, which is a Welsh name, National Outdoor Centre based in Wales, but operated for Sport England. And we basically are at the forefront of technical and human and environmental skills, building those skills needed to operate in the outdoors. So we're very much outdoor sector, outdoor education. But my background is in scientific publishing. I've also worked in the technology sector and other education settings as well. Thanks, you.
Ruth. Thanks, Ruth. Okay, so women leadership in times of crisis, and here we are in the education sector. I'd like to start the conversation just with a short and brief description from each of you as to the place in which you work. You know, what is the male-female ratio, for example, in the workforce and in the leadership, and you know, who are your service users? What do they look like? Preeti, can I start with you, please?
Of course. Early years is my world. So early years is predominantly dominated by a female workforce. The end users, of course, will be parents, and of course families come in different shapes and sizes, but the workforce itself is predominantly female, and therefore the leadership is predominantly female as well. Interestingly, leadership in early years, it's sometimes not a choice that people make. It's sometimes something people fall into because they have chosen to sort of set up nurseries, especially Montessori nurseries.
Thank you, Preeti. Tram, over to you.
Yes, perhaps, you know, I give you a little bit of perhaps on my background as well, because that to put it into context of why perhaps I will share more about my industry, which is fintech. I used to be in traditional finance, and my background is not in education. And I used to be a trader, so the industry is non-diverse. There were not a lot of women on the trading floor, and I would say few or none at all. And a couple of years ago, I quit banking. I quit banking to transform today the world of education in finance. So I call myself a disruptor. I built the Center for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship 3.5 years ago. And we are a digital platform to help people to upskill. Why? Because adults today are having their job transformed. A lot of the technology is impacting the way of doing finance with fintech. And the reality is that being an adult, where do you start your journey learning, upskilling yourself? There's no place apart from quitting your job and learning. And so that's why we set it up, to make that gap about how do you equip yourself about financial technology and entrepreneurship. you mentioned about, you know, a few names during the presentation early on, where you've seen, you know, Christine Lagarde recently appointed, with also Mrs. Onzi Ongunjo-Iweala, head of the World Trade Organization. On the fintech space, you have Anne Boden, who is the CEO of Starling Bank. I don't know if you know Starling Bank. It's a disruptor, you know, the first woman, you know, leading and building from scratch, you know, a bank, which is for me, and she's also, if I may, but also expert teaching at CFTE. So explaining what is fintech. We see, you know, Alison Rose, also the first CEO in the UK, being a woman leading a bank. What has happened? What has happened? I think my view is that there's a huge milestone from all of us in the industry that we see. We are seeing, why are we seeing all these changes? I think for many reasons. For many reasons we are seeing this is because first, we've never had women at the top. We've never had women at the top in our industry, and suddenly, you know, a lot of women are coming in at the top, and that's why, you know, we are seeing a lot of people, you know, talking about this. This is a reality check. Secondly, because our industry finance is transforming in a big way. And why? Because technology is now, you know, impacting a lot of the way we do finance, and why the industry is changing, and people need to change. So they are opening doors to those who would have never considered having a career into finance and fintech, can now strive. And fintech can only thrive if there's a special workforce to support it. So just to keep you in a nutshell, why are we seeing this transformation? Finance is changing, fintech is changing, and we need people from diverse backgrounds. So that's why we are, you know, in the finance industry, we are encouraged to have more people from diverse views, diverse backgrounds and experiences. And that's why the industry is looking for women. We are seeing it also at CFT. Why? Because it being in disruption into education, I encourage a lot of women to get to learn about it. And today, if I may just share, you know, 40% of our learners are women. So it could be, you could be having 30, 40, 50-year-old and start your fintech journey and start leading also and transforming. We have amazing experiences, but I'll stop there. But that's why we're seeing a big transformation happening in the industry.
Thanks, Tram, and you raise a number of very good points, which I hope we'll come back to later on, tease some of those out with the rest of the panelists. But thank you, that's great, it's very rich. Ruth, can I ask you to come in?
Yes, thanks. So I've been in the sector that I'm currently in for 1.5 years, so relatively new. But it's very clear that for years it has been very male dominated, no doubt. Certainly mountaineering and in the outdoor and sort of recreational sector. Across, so mountaineering, paddle sports, mountain biking, and in leadership coaching and training positions. And I think it's fair to say that women haven't necessarily seen themselves as coaches and leaders in that sector. They haven't been able to identify with communications that have been sent out. But I think in the last few years, I'm not the first female chief executive, I'm the second. You know, we've started to see a change in the sector. We have a female chair, and for the first time we have our first female chief instructor. Now, as a national outdoor centre, you know, it's very important that we lead by example. And in having these roles filled by females and by very strong, capable, talented women, we start to show role models. So it's been important for us to recognise that and make that more of an issue in our communications and our marketing. But again, I just want to put a bit of wider context to this as well. When I came into the business, it was very clear that the way that women were treated and the way that, and rightly or wrongly, you know, this is, we are where we are, years and years of tradition and sort of old working practices needed to be overturned. We needed to review terms and conditions. We needed to look at contracts. And over the last year, even before the pandemic hit, we knew we needed to revise, achieve some parity of pay and review salaries. So we've addressed those pay inequalities, and we've now got more female senior instructors on the team, and we plan to introduce more as we go forward. So to answer your first question, the ratio of females in the businesses has improved over the last few years. Not all down to me, but it's certainly something that I want to carry on. And we are starting to see now an increase, I would imagine, in the service users. It'll resonate with them more when they start to see female instructors. Certainly in paddle sports, it's very important that we start to see female instructors in paddle sports. And it's important that we recognise that in the communications and marketing going forward.
Thanks, Ruth. That's really interesting, this whole sort of concept of role models. And, you know, until you see somebody that you identify with, it's very, you know, it's sometimes difficult to make that choice to step into something.
Absolutely.
So as an organisation, you know, the second CEO, female chair, first chief instructor, that's the key one, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Very
again, lots of rich stuff there. We'll come back to that hopefully later also. Rachel, over to you, please.
Thank you. I work in the university sector, formerly a primary school teacher, and depending on the age of the children that we work with, we've seen that particularly in the early years phase, in terms of training, we get a lot of engagement from female students. We're currently working on a number of projects to try and encourage more men into teaching generally, and we've got specific focus on recruiting more men from ethnic minorities into teaching. In terms of the workforce at the university, we're very lucky that we are indeed quite balanced in terms of male-female ratios, but that's been an active process. That hasn't happened by accident. The teaching profession with regards to the primary age phase is largely women across the board. Once you move into the secondary school education, we see an increase in the engagement of men. But that, again, it depends on the institution, it depends on the location of the institution, etc., etc. So we are actively trying to encourage more balance, but our staff as a whole try to provide a platform in terms of being role models for the students. So we recruit people depending on different factors. It's not just about necessarily academic qualifications, it's also about experiences in terms of professional and also some lived experiences, because training teachers to work in a multi-ethnic and indeed diverse society, the teaching profession needs to reflect that society. So we really do try and factor that in within the recruitment process. We're facing a lot of challenges with underrepresentation of particular groups at the moment, particularly minority ethnic groups. We are focused on increasing engagement within education within that area. It's an ongoing challenge. The pandemic has given us endless challenges in terms of recruitment, because we can't actually get out there and have that energy exchange with people during recruitment activities. So it's largely based online at the moment, and that does bring its challenges. In terms of moving forward, we're really optimistic that as we begin to move away from the crisis that we've all been living and breathing in for the last year, that we will see greater engagement. I think there's been a real spotlight put on education generally throughout the pandemic, and particularly the work of schools. The number of parents that I've come into contact with over the last year who've really congratulated me on being a former primary school teacher and, oh, I don't know how you did it, because they're now homeschooling. There's really been a spotlight placed on the work of teachers, and also the richness of what teaching actually is. So in terms of recruitment, we are looking to diversify as we move forward, but it's such a fascinating space to be working in, not just because of the pandemic, but because of the way that education is beginning to be viewed globally. And events like this, where we get to share space internationally, where we are essentially all in one room, is absolutely brilliant for moving the picture forward. So it's great to be here.
Thanks, Rachel. Again, plenty to talk about from that also. This concept about the profession reflecting society is a key thing, isn't it, across the board and the outside of education, just generally speaking. We need to reflect the communities we serve and we live within, so that's really key. And also, I think another valuable point there you made was around essentially you have to be valued. You know, you do something valuable, but unless one sees it, they don't know it exists. And parents, you say at the moment, their voice is quite loud in supporting teachers and everything they're doing, particularly during this period. Chenaara, over to you, please.
So I'd say in my early corporate life, the workforce was more skewed towards the male presence, so definitely more men than women. Our service users would be, I'd say, a balance of men and women. As I got into my mid-corporate life, however, I did find that that changed and there were increasingly more women. Now, I'm not going to go as far to say a 50-50 split, maybe 60-40 on a good day. So there's definitely been a change in my working life. With what I do at the moment in the early years sector, it's overwhelmingly female. And just as an example, I've similarly run a recent recruitment drive. I've not had a single male candidate, and that's despite specifically targeting areas where there might be potential male candidates and making myself known in male early years educator spaces. One thing I will note, however, is that while the leadership in the sector is largely female, those who hold the keys to entering that leadership has remained male. And I'm speaking about the bankers, the property developers, well, I haven't had to deal with lawyers because I could do that myself, but all these professionals that have allowed me to run my business or given me tools to run the business, still overwhelmingly male.
Thank you, Chenaara. And yes, that's a theme that's also spoken about, the sort of access to funding, access to the infrastructure, as you say, is often, decisions often rest with men in institutions. I think there was work done recently by the Federation of Businesses that spoke to that, actually. But that's a very good point. Thank you. Okay, well, I want to pick up on some of those strands. I'll start with just this concept of leadership and the essence of leadership. And you've all made a comment, and a number of comments actually in some cases, around what that looks like. What does it look like? Can we describe the characteristics? Is leadership different to being a leader? So lots to think about generally in that preamble. Preeti, would you like to start with a response, please?
Sorry, Max, your question was, but is leadership different to?
Is leadership different to leading? So what is the essence of leadership? Leading, is it different?
I mean, that's an interesting question to dwell upon, isn't it? Is leadership different to leading? I mean, there are many definitions of leadership, yet I think we come across leadership at different levels, and I think that will be different for different people. In the early years sector, you could be leading a setting and have a very strategic leadership role there, but when you sort of come down the rungs a little bit and think about leadership within the classrooms, leaderships with children, and children leading their own learning, there's different levels of leadership there. So you can have a very sort of clear strategic vision around leading how you want your setting to be, but leadership skills I think are important at all levels, and I think that recognition is important, that we need to empower every individual in every sector to have those leadership skills, because they will be leading in some way or another.
Yes, thank you. Just a comment in or a question in from Nick, actually. I'll just throw that into the mix here, if I may. So let me read this out. There's been research to indicate that in entrepreneurship, both men and women demonstrated a bias towards women when they were making presentations and applying for funding. So men ask questions related to growth and development, women ask questions concerned with avoiding losses and emphasising reduction of risks. Do the panel think that women would benefit from developing a stronger executive presence? Who'd like to go first on that?
If I may, I think this is definitely part of the larger issue around women's leadership. Being a leader, anyone can do that. You can get up tomorrow and call yourself whatever you fancy. We will not mention certain ex-presidents who've done similar things. However, leadership is a set of skills. It is a set of training, and it's a set of understanding. And to start to really embody leadership, you have to understand what that means for yourself. Now, that entails leadership development. And just as an example, I've undergone leadership development with the Leadership Trust. I know there are a number of organisations that provide this. However, where we then have the issue is how we access that leadership development. And time again, we have too many organisations where it depends on you knowing that the thing exists, you asking for it, you having an advocate, And if you don't have access to an advocate or don't even know the thing is there, how on earth are we going to redress the balance of understanding the difference between being a leader and leadership, and then actually advancing not just women, but Black and ethnic minorities, underrepresented groups forward? So it's something I'm particularly passionate about, and absolutely fully understand the comment, and thank you for asking.
Does anybody else want to comment, Tram?
I think I totally agree with you, so I won't repeat. I think I totally agree with you. It's a set of skills. It's to have it. I think it's also for me a mindset. I mean, skills, mindset as well. You know, having this mindset, I guess, of true leaders today. I'm not saying it because I'm saying it. We start to talk about this. Is about this ability to change, this ability to adapt to change, because the world is really changing. And you have had, you know, your set of skills, you know, to manage, you know, a country, to manage your organization, your company, your teams, etc. However, you need to reset. You need to know, you know, where you are. And at any age or at any stage of your career, I think it's important that you readapt to this world. And I think it's about having the right mindset. And so it's about, for me, it's about also, if I may add, mindset, but also looking at not only locally, but looking at what's happening around the world. We used to look at very certain way, but now the world, and early on someone was saying, we are living in a world of collaboration. So try to make it like a global. When we do things, it's about scalability. It's about, if you want to scale your business, or if you want to scale your project, it's about looking at how do you scale. And for me, it's about having this global view. So mindset and global view as well helps.
That's great. In fact, Ruth, over to you. Yes.
I was just going to say, I think the crisis, the COVID pandemic, has actually created an opportunity. It's a moment in time, because this is testing our mettle, whether you are male or female. And I think running businesses now is for me, the single most important aspect for this is resilience, and how we adapt in a moment of crisis, and how we, I think as a truly resilient leader knows where they're strong, they know where there's areas for development, what takes them from pressure to stress, and how to rebalance so that you can focus your mind again on what you need to do. But it's really about having confidence in who you are and what you do, so that we can create and build and take opportunities, so that we can bounce back, knowing that we're going to find a way through uncertainty, and even be able to adapt when there is a crisis. So we had a situation in our business where our business was closed, as many were, and our whole team was thrown into turmoil. We had to take care of our team members. And when you're a leader, how do you cope with that? You need coping mechanisms for yourself. You need to be able to support your team. And it draws on a whole different set of skills that are not just, they can't just necessarily be taught in a classroom.
That's really interesting.
There needs to be an environment in which to encourage people to become resilient, because and I'll just finish on this point. I think when you set that against the backdrop now of the pandemic, businesses are now having to reassess their place in the world. So they're now having to look about, I think that there will be a much greater expectation on brands and organisations around how they contribute positively to society, beyond the bottom line. And that means that they're going to have to figure out how to prosper in the future with some strong, authentic purpose. And it needs a different kind of leader. And it does lend itself to the female, I say women generally, and there is academic research behind this, lend themselves more to being able to adapt and handle those issues.
Thanks, Ruth. In fact, the Harvard Business Review just recently published a piece of research that they'd done a couple of studies, one before the pandemic, and they asked employees to rate their bosses, male or female. Yeah. And women did much better than men. And they reconducted that piece of research in the early part of the pandemic, sort of May to June of last year, had the same results but magnified. So women were seen to perform even better than they had pre-pandemic. And when asked to rate, the areas, to describe the how, what they were doing, it was in areas like, taking initiative, building relationships, developing others, working with integrity and honesty, all these other attributes that are non-technical. Absolutely. It's not about doing the job, it's about all those other things. I wonder, Chenaara or Preeti, do you have any thoughts on that, bearing in mind the Montessori principles around those attributes?
Shall I go first, Chenaara? Absolutely. I mean, the cornerstone of Montessori principles is trust, and then all of those attributes that you've just mentioned, Max. And I think, as early years educators, or educators generally, this is something that we really have to sort of focus on going forward. That, this be the cornerstone of every educational foundation, really, because these are the skills that our future generations are going to require. I think, the pandemic has really highlighted to us that, yes, academic achievements are absolutely important, but there are other skills and attributes that as individuals need to have, because, in this time of crises that the pandemic has brought to us, we have had to be reactive, we have had to be flexible, we have had to, bring out so many skills and attributes, some of which we didn't know we had in ourselves. But, we really need our next generations to really understand that these are vital skills that they are going to need going forward. And I think our responsibility as educators, as many of us are on the screen, is really that. How do we ensure that we make this a legacy for our future generations?
That's great. Chenaara, you've got anything to add to that?
Certainly, no, I'd absolutely add to that, and also picking up on a point that Ruth made earlier. What we're really speaking about when we put it in a Montessori context is creating safe spaces for people to have these experiences to learn from. If you do not have a safe space in which to learn, the exercise is absolutely 100% pointless. And something that I find is lacking, not just in female leadership, but in leadership development within companies. It's always a case of, I need you to lead now, but there's no room to get it wrong. So something that I've challenged myself on in my own leadership of this brand new school is saying to myself, well, what do I want to create for my staff? Do I want them to come into work every day and have to hit targets and they have to do this many observations? Or do I want to create a space where they tell me how they want to progress and understand that my role as a leader, and as a leader leading with my why, it's to build a space for them and to want them to progress and to accept, yeah, of course they're going to make mistakes, but this is a safe space that we're all ultimately going to benefit from.
I love that, leading with a why. Fantastic, just imagery there. Tram, did you want to come back on that?
No, it's. I think that's to add, to all of you. It's about having this entrepreneurship mindset, and having set up, the CFT, which you have the E, which is entrepreneurship, is how do you find a nurturing organization who allows you to try, learn and learn and test, having like your garden where you can test and learn your thing. And just by reiterating and making sure that all your employees have a space where they can build and start, some project and test it if it works or if it doesn't work, but have this ability to do that. I think it's creating a safe environment for people to grow. It's a new way, when I was, working in finance, is very highly regulated. But we see more and more of, organizations, including banks, having their innovation lab where leaders, encourage the employee to be an entrepreneur, and they call that intrapreneur. So this is the new way of, building in a safe environment. But we are seeing also, organizations like banks, and we are helping some of them to have this culture of let's say, test and learn, the entrepreneurship innovators. And this is the new type of leadership as well. We allow, people to fail and learn again.
Absolutely. And, we learn by failure, don't we? The young children, we encourage them to pick themselves up. And that's, it's the process rather than the result, actually, that often gives them the most development opportunity. And that's really very interesting. I mean, I wonder, Rachel, just coming into your world of academia, and there's how do we leverage some of those attributes that the panelists have been talking about in a structure that's a bit more rigid, isn't it? It can't be as entrepreneurial as Tram would like, and it doesn't have the flexibility to do so that Chenaara in her own practice, can choose to take.
I think it's essentially about us engaging with our widening participation strategies. So all universities have a widening participation strategy in terms of how they engage with communities across all areas. So different communities in terms of background, in terms of engagement with university. And it's really about creating an equality of opportunity. So offering support to those who would not necessarily engage with a university. So leaving the door open and actually the ladder down, providing support in terms of developing cultural capital around what it means to go to university. A lot of our students are often the first ones in their family to actually attend a university. So the work that we do prior to the point at which they join us in terms of making university a safe space, making it an accessible space, I think is absolutely key. Unfortunately, we are restricted in terms of academic qualifications with regards to students joining us in terms of what they've done before, so BTECs, A-levels, etc. But what we try and do is provide opportunities for partnerships with schools or colleges to actually begin the relationship with individuals before they get to us, so that widening participation in terms of engaging with communities really does start at a very early stage, and hopefully that has a positive impact on how people view the space of university and how they see themselves within that space.
That's great. That's really very interesting, and the point around cultural capital is one that links beautifully back to these key attributes that have been shown to be more prevalent, it would seem, in female leaders, which are key success factors, if you like, for everybody. It should be men and women that do that. I'm just wondering, actually, Ruth, just in your section, the outdoors, which is, as you say, predominantly male, but you're seeing some women come through, and thinking about maybe children in the outdoor and the education opportunities that they present, is that one way to create this opportunity for cultural capital and just involvement in something outside of specifically an academic pursuit?
Absolutely. I mean, this is partly the point I was making earlier as well, is building that resilience. And I think it's part of certainly part of the Montessori education, and it's part of the outdoor sector and outdoor education. Like it's not a part of the formal curriculum. It ought to be. And I think that we're certainly as a national centre, we've been focused for many years, 65 years we've been around, on sort of the high end delivery. But actually what we've seen, and we've started to see a decline in the number of kids coming through and showing an interest in taking up sort of the skills development, skills courses. So what we're doing now is broadening our footprint to be much more inclusive. We're encouraging families. We're as a centre, we want to see youngsters coming through. We've reinstated our centre assistant scheme. And the idea is that we can, hopefully collaborate even at an even earlier stage and engage kids at an earlier point when they start, just to give them that inspiration and that enthusiasm to get into the outdoors. Because once they're outdoors, they're picking up all of these other skills that they need for the future. And it would be a dream to have that incorporated into mainstream curriculum much more formally, I think. Because I think that would gives them the resilience to be able to handle all of these other challenges that we see in business. That's the question.
Yeah, no, that's rich with reply there. I just want to throw in a comment from Nicholas Bryce, who is just making point that back in May 2019, Jacinda Ardern's she put well-being right in the centre of the definition of GDP as a key measure of success in New Zealand, and look at the result. The COVID success rate there is one to be held up as something well achieved. Again, well-being being one of those attributes that we don't first think about when we think about leaders or leadership. And he also has thrown in his hat there saying, I'm a man and I'll run through walls for skillful female leaders. So there you go. I think there's enough there taken up. So in terms of then female leadership, is it, the pandemic is a crisis, as we've all said. We think our voices are being heard. There's opportunities for our voices to continue to be heard through new ways to get access and different ways of looking at things. But are we on a level playing field in terms of, are we accepted in, do you think? You know, are we asked to step into these difficult situations simply because we do have this skill set? And when we do, is it sort of fraught with risk, or should we take that as a, you know, a genuine offer? There's a lot there. I'm happy for anyone to pick up any element of that. There's this concept of the glass cliff, where, you know, women are invited into senior leadership positions to fix something, but they weren't aware that they were sort of asked to do specifically that, and it's often, you know, a tricky situation to be in, and this is the invite to the top table. Has anyone had any experience of that, or anyone that has had experience of that type of situation?
It's not something of personal experience, but just hearing you speak about this, I'm immediately thinking of Sasha Romatanovic, who was made head at, it was Grant Thornton, wasn't it? Yes, one of the large accountancy firms. And I think regardless of the point at which a female is brought into leadership, if the structure behind that person is not set up to listen, to understand, to embrace even the slightest bit of change, such as, heaven forbid, capping one's own salary, we're going to have a problem. And I know that she was forced out rather quickly. I believe they said that she was pursuing a socialist agenda by capping her own salary. I mean, that's it's absolutely laughable. So I'm less concerned about the timing with which a woman is brought into leadership positions and more concerned with the structure around them and whether that is going to allow them to flourish or not.
Good point. Yeah. Anybody else sort of come in on that? Okay. So if we were sort of going to put together, you know, some calls to action, and what would that look like? We've mentioned 2 or 3 things as we've gone through, and I'm hoping Kate, as our rapporteur, has captured those. But is there anything anyone would like to highlight? As we know, we mustn't forget to include these or this.
I think, to go back to an earlier point that I made around leaving the ladder down, I think in terms of having women in leadership positions, I think if you are in that position, you have a great responsibility, and the responsibility is to lead the ladder down, and even, you know, get somebody up the ladder behind you, give them a helping hand. I think we can use our experiences to absolutely empower other people, and we do that. And that's not necessarily an active process. That's something that happens. You know, if you are in a leadership position, your presence can actually inspire people. But I do feel we have a responsibility. So it's remembering that it's not just about you, it's about your community, and your specifically your female community, and helping to empower them by, as I say, leaving the ladder down. Somebody that I've worked with over a number of years, Professor Vinnie Lander, has been an incredible inspiration to me, and that's her phrase. I've borrowed that from her for today, but that's something I can absolutely say I've experienced, and hopefully I can pass that on to people who I work with.
Great, thank you, Rachel.
I can echo that, what Rachel's saying, that I've had first-hand experience in my early career. I found it most hardest working with some women, and I think it's incredibly important that I think there is sometimes a competition. There can be, I know that in my early career I had every intention of doing as well as I possibly could and working hard, but I was stifled by multiple females in different sectors. Actually, this isn't sector specific, and I think it's very important that we, and I've addressed this going through my career, and made sure that and it isn't just about proactively recruiting females, it's what Rachel says, it's about developing females and encouraging, empowering, very genuinely giving opportunities to females, and then supporting them as best you can. So it is about leaving the ladder down, definitely. I've had first-hand experience of that.
Yeah, I think I echo the same. I echo the same, and I think now that finance is having also non-diverse, so we are trying to change that. We want to bring more and more women into finance, into fintech. But how do we do that and apply it to ourselves? It's the same. Put it as top of your priority as well, is to hire women first, and also to help and support them, to make sure that they feel nurtured, so that they can feel confident, that they have a nurturing ecosystem, so that they can grow, promote them, so that they can start leading some project, and making sure that they are being heard as well. Because sometimes you are in a room with other men, and sometimes they feel shy, lack of confidence as they grow, and sometimes they are quite young, because they're now having other type of skills, and they grow very, very fast, but the skills is not there. So you want to make sure that as you grow your company, you also put some structure in place so they can learn and grow and accelerate their career as they grow. I want to also say something, and I didn't say, for me, I mean, I heard, a lot of you saying that your industry has a lot of women teaching. On my side at CFT, I'm struggling to find women teaching, because the people that are teaching at CFT, I mean, in the industry, are male, and I'm trying to encourage a lot of women coming to teach finance technology. They are very, very good. Today, actually, for the International Women's Day, we're celebrating them but it's hard for us to find them, because they shy away to share the expertise. So I think it's important in certain industry, that is my industry, which is finance, and in education, I would love to welcome more, women expert teaching, and this is not something easy. There's one thing I want to say, and it's a challenge for me. It's a challenge for me because we talk a lot about women and in finance, but encouraging women entrepreneurs, for example, me being one. We are the first to encourage, and we do a lot for women. We spend a lot of time helping women with role models, having, a women teaching, and so the women can see, their path and their career, learning from the challenges and the opportunities that they can see in finance and technology. However, I would like to challenge this. And I would ask a question, which is, do women want to become all-female leaders? Do they want to grasp all these opportunities? Why am I saying that? Why I'd like to argue that? The fact that I will share just one example. We are spending a lot of time, me being a woman entrepreneur in finance, I have developed a program for everyone, but with an amazing woman, Abby, from Uber. We launched a program of extrapreneurship to encourage people, to learn about working with a scale-up startup. And it's a very good program. We spend a lot of time. We are encouraging a lot of people, and it's a scale up. You learn extrapreneurship, so you gain, ability to think like an entrepreneur with a big startup, which is Uber. So everybody knows Uber. We have 100 applicants. I only have 8 women. 8 women. For me, it's a signal. It's a signal that that women can learn. So I can see 35% of the women are learning, but they're not, moving to that step. So I want to challenge that, it's a problem that I face, that we face in the industry, is that it's somehow, a barrier, that they don't want to make that jump.
Yeah.
And this is a fact.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I know, Chenaara, you've got your hand up. I need to go back into the main session, but let me give you, is it a quick one? I'd love to, I don't want to miss you out. So if you can make it brief, I'd invite you to do so, please.
Give 3 key things that organisations can do, and I think it will answer Tram's point as well as to why maybe there haven't been women going forth. First of all, if we have any kind of leadership development programme, you need to publicise it. People cannot apply for what they don't know exists. And I mean publicize it everywhere. Put it in the toilets, put it in the dining room. Don't just put it in the executive office, because then that's a self-selection in itself. The second thing is, don't necessarily link it to attaining seniority in the company. Because if you have a company where seniority looks white and male, you're not going to solve the problem. There's absolutely no point. And third of all, I would be setting quotas for any line manager, because we all need advocates. We all hear that mentorship and advocacy on our behalf helps push us forward. So I would be asking line managers, if you haven't recommended somebody working for you become a leader, either that person's wrong in their role or you're not doing your job. Simple 3 ways that we can push our leadership forward and ensure that it's accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Chenaara. And again, I could carry on talking about this for much longer. You know, there's so much rich comment coming out from all of you, and I'd love to be able to continue to do that. Unfortunately, I'm just going to have to pause it for the moment. I think Kate has captured a lot of what we've been talking about and sent that across. So if we can all join the live streaming now, I'll do my best to convey a summary of what we've been talking about just now, and I'll see you in a short while. I hope that was a really inspiring session. I was amazed at just how rich it was with depth and breadth and really creative thinking. I was, there's a lot for me to go away and think about today. Our conversation has also been rich, very, very rich. I'm thoroughly delighted to have been moderating it today. I'm very conscious of time. I'm also very conscious that there may be 1 or 2 questions or some final comments on the back of having listened to the feedback from the other participating cities. So if anyone would like to make any final comments or final questions, I'll ask for them now.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment, and it was pertaining to the question about what leadership for women is going to look like in the future. And I'd like to invite everyone to just take a moment and have a pause and take a deep breath. Remind ourselves that a couple of weeks ago, we woke up to the first Black, Asian, female vice president in the United States, an utterly incredible achievement we didn't think we'd see in our lifetimes. Whereas this morning, we've woken up to a multiracial woman being attacked in the press for speaking out about the blatant racism that she's experienced in this country and the suicidal thoughts it's driven her to. This is a space of a couple of weeks. So my point is simply this: in order to advance our conversation about women in leadership in any role, we also have to advance our conversations about race.
Thank you, Chenaara. I think that's very powerful. And I think actually it's diversity, isn't it? It's difference. And, you know, we have to delight in difference and walk that walk every single day. And that just means going to the essence of who we are as an individual and being honest with ourselves. But yeah, that's right, we have to call it out. Excellent.
Yeah, I would just like to end and say, you know, we can't be passive in whatever we do. We have to be very active, whether it be the race conversation, whether it be the female leadership conversation, whether it be the education conversation. We can't just be passive. We've got to be active and do something about it.
And of course, we are all catalysts of change, aren't we? We each hold a candle, which collectively lights a room. And I genuinely believe that, you know, that's all achievable and doable.
No, yes, no, thanks a lot. I think a lot of things have been said. Of course, you know, there are so much more. There's so much more that we should address, you know, and I must say that which shall we apply it? You know, don't say you have to do it, but how do we do it? Why are we doing? But let's do it. Apply it to yourself, apply it to your organization. Try to work, you know, with government, with, you know, people around you, and make it actionable. Things that
Yes.
can apply very quickly, and that will show. And as a, you know, a leader, you can't be only talking. It's about, you know, making it happen as well and do it. So
Yes.
that would be my say.
Thank you, Tram. And I think that's, again, very wise wisdom to be imparting. I totally agree with that. Thank you. I'll say it's been a fantastically rich conversation all around. I'm very pleased that you could all take part, whether you're in the audience, whether you're live streaming, and of course our panelists today. There's a lot for us to continue talking about and taking action on. So let's do that. I will just close it down for today and just say again, thank you all very much. I have been delighted and privileged to have been moderating today.
Thank you so much, Max. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
For the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
All best. Take care, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.